I hope you're well. In this one, I'm earning brownie points by making Mrs. 10 Minutes a quick and easy pair of temporary racks to support trays of fabric samples, and at the same time using a couple of new tools that I really haven't had time to play with just yet. So Mrs. 10 Minutes is a serial quilter. She often has several on the go, and when that happens, she has strips of fabric sorted by colour or pattern on boards or plastic trays. These need to go somewhere other than on the work surface, so I suggested a pair of temporary hangers, strips of birch ply with dowels set in at a slight angle like fingers on a drying rack. These could hang off the radiator in the sewing room on simple clips or brackets with sort of fingers to slot into the grill on the top of the rad, and maybe a magnet on the ply to keep everything steady. These strips could also be moved closer together or further apart, depending if the fabric tray size changed in future. My proposal was approved, so I made up a quick sample to try it out and to make sure the angles worked out okay and that I left enough space between the dowels to get my hand in. Of course, all the angles need to be identical, so I took the opportunity to use this MilesCraft DrillMate Pro drilling guide, as it can handle angled drilling, something my fancy Bosch drill press can't do. And I used my sliding bevel to find a comfortable angle, just steep enough to keep the trays on the dowels, but not so steep that everything falls off the back. The dowels are 9.5mm thick, that's 3/8 in the old money, and left over from a previous project. But I preferred the fit of the dowel in a 9mm hole. It's tight, but they can just be hammered in without glue, and they seemed perfectly secure. I'm not sure I could get them out without breaking them, to be honest, so this test piece can stay as it is. The sewing room radiator has ribs on the side that I want the racks to bear against, but the slots in the top grill don't line up, so any little bracket that I make to hook over those will need to have the fingers offset. Now, normally I'd be scrabbling around looking for a scrap of aluminium angle that I could butcher and bend into shape to make those brackets, but in this brave new 3D printable world, I just spent 10 minutes in my CAD software to draw something up and set it to printing. Back in the workshop, I've picked up a bit of 18mm birch ply that's about the right size from my stash of offcuts that'll come in handy one day. Yes, today's that day. And I've marked this up using the test piece as a reference. The client brief was for a rack to take 4 trays, but I reckon there's just about space for a 5th in there with a little bit of careful juggling, and it never hurts to over-deliver a little, especially when you're married to the client. I'm going to drill both halves of the rack at the same time, then split them in two afterwards, and I'm using the back of the guide rail on my MFT bench to bear the drilling guide against. I want to be able to move the drilling guide consistently between the 2 columns of holes, and I was happy to discover that the bench dog's flag stops can be used on a guide rail T-slot. Who knew? It's clearly not intended for this, as it isn't a great fit, but it's definitely better than just having a clamp on the rail. My 9mm drill is a lip and spur or brad point bit, and I've marked the hole centers with an awl to help locate the bit. And then with everything positioned, I can start drilling, moving the MilesCraft guide between the flag stops, and then moving the workpiece along to the next position down, and so on until I have all 10 holes drilled. Now, while all that was happening, my 3D printer had conjured up the first test bracket. It really is like magic, and while it was really good, it wasn't quite there. I'd allowed for the nominal 18mm thickness of the birch ply rather than the actual material measurement, but I was happy that it was close enough for me to make the adjustments for that on the drawing and then hit print to get a matched pair and away. Back in the workshop, and I'm really pleased with how the angled holes have worked out, but I just wanted to clean up the pencil marks off the face of the birch ply before cutting it into 2 halves. And this brings me to the next new tool that I haven't had a chance to spend much time with. This is the Mirka Deros RS. It launched earlier in the year, but unfortunately I wasn't able to attend. My YouTube pals Keith at Rag & Bone Brown and Leo at Hand Eye Craft both have these sanders and both speak very highly of them. I'll link their videos down below. And Mirka were kind enough to send one across for me to take a look at just the other day. As my 10 Minute Workshop Plus members know, I've tested it with some very aggressive sounding, but I wanted to try it out on something a little bit more delicate, and taking pencil marks off a piece of birch ply sounded like the perfect test. This is a rotary sander, a spinning disc, but it's incredibly quiet and easy to control, and I had absolutely no issues at all taking off the pencil marks without burning through the top face of birch ply. This sander is on loan, but I'm not sure how long I'll have it for, so I'll have some more first thoughts on it very soon. With everything cleaned up and sanded smooth, I can split this in half at the table saw and then get the dowels fitted. The first couple went in okay, but I decided to make life a little easier on myself by just putting a slight chamfer on the ends with a bit of P120 abrasive. And I'm holding the 300mm long dowels at the base to guide them in and to take out as much of the springiness as possible when you're hammering in a foot-long 3/8 dowel. They went in without any dramas, and I've got to say I'm really pleased with how consistent the angles and the spacings are. I've got my finished brackets from the 3D printer, and after a quick check just to make sure it fits okay, I can get them screwed onto the top ends of the birch ply strips. And then hang them onto the sewing room radiator. The fit's good, and I can just add some self-adhesive neodymium magnets to the bottom of the strips just to keep them located as the trays are loaded on and off. And that's pretty much the job done. There's no need to put a finish on this simple and occasional utility shelving. It doesn't hurt that the dowels aren't sanded either, for example. And I've got to say, I really enjoyed putting this together. Sometimes it's great to plan a bigger project, to agonize over the drawings and the cut list, to marvel at the sheer volume of materials that you've bought. And you look at the completed job with a sense of satisfaction and relief. But I think it's equally satisfying to rattle out something quick and no less challenging in just a few hours from start to finish, and especially if you're scoring brownie points at home as well. I have to say as well that the 3D printer is rapidly becoming an indispensable tool in the workshop. I'll have my first 3D printed product along soon, but in the meantime, if you do have a similar radiator at home and need to hang something off it, then these little brackets work really well and do a great job. The files are in the 3D printing forum for 10-Minute Workshop Plus members. I'll tell you what, I'll add links to them to the next newsletter. Sign up for free at 10mw.email. A quick reminder too that I bought the Festool MB40 drilling guide a little while back, and Peter Sefton at Woodworkers Workshop was kind enough to supply the MilesCraft DrillMate Pro for reference. I'll have that video along shortly, and don't forget that you can get a 5% discount off most things at Woodworkers Workshop with the offer code 10-Minute Workshop at checkout. And as I said, the Mirka Deros RS is on loan from Mirka UK. I'm genuinely unsure how long I have it for, so I'll have some further thoughts on that quite remarkable sander sooner rather than later. But I'll call this one done for this week. Thanks so much for taking a look. As always, leave a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.